Hey everyone, if you saw the timestamp, you can see this is a very long video. It's not that it's super complicated, it's just that we want to make sure we go through all the details and not just leave you with the basics to where you get confused or stuck again. So take some time, relax, enjoy the video. Hey, Shawnee from SpeedCubeReview.com. I actually made a full video on HTR. Actually, I think I've made like 3, and I keep deleting them because I am just not happy with how it turns out, because it still sounds way too complex and convoluted than it needs to. I actually first made a video about HTR back in 2019 when I made my big hour-and-a-half long FMC video. And the problem was I mainly described it like doing domino reduction on a third axis. So I'm going to start this video out by telling you about why HTR seems to be so complicated, just for people to grasp, including myself, and how there's a couple main ways in how people get around this. So I'm going to do this, and I might intersperse with the videos that I already made. So here's the main thing. Half-turn reduction, HTR, is where the cube gets into a state where it can be solved with only half turns. And really you're orienting the edges and corners on the third axis, just like you did for domino reduction. But there's 2 things that you could fall into, because it could be in a solvable state, or it could be that you have parity, meaning that it looks solvable, but it's not. So as an example, do an n permutation. This looks like it could be solved in half-turn reduction. You have all the edges oriented, all the corners look like they're oriented, edges oriented, but you can't. You will get to a point where there's just 2 edges and 2 corners that need to be swapped. Odd parity. Not possible to be solved without doing 90-degree turns. Or the other thing you could have is something like this, where it again looks like it could be solved, but you have 3 corners on one face and 1 on the other, and only doing 180-degree turns, you can't get that to the other side, and often that is called fake HTR. So there's a couple things people do. First off, to make sure you don't run into the parity issue, is you count how many corner turns you need. And you can do that by doing how you would find corners for blind solving and count how many swaps you're going to need. I don't do that anymore, and I'll show in this video how I just count the number of quarter turns and I don't have to do a blind trace. And then the other one is finding out exactly what case you have. This is where the 2 different versions come in. And there is the version that I would say most people use, that I'll put a link in the description, of documents and charts and spreadsheets and things like that that could help you out, that's more organized by subsets. You have 4A, 4B, 2C, 4C, things like that are subsets. And then memorizing those subsets, possibly some algorithms of what goes with which one, people find ways of solving it. I'm very visual, and Rodney Kinney came up with an amazing thing called hyperparity. I know a lot of people who say hyperparity is more confusing for them. I think it's much easier and really cleared things up for me. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to jump to the video I made before, where I go through how I find out HTR and then how I use hyperparity to solve it. And hyperparity is just a fancy name for what I call an HTR map. And I think it's important, before I jump to that, to explain why. Why do we do this? And the short answer is that you can look further ahead and see what subset you have or where you are in the map. And if, let's say, you have a dozen different domino reductions that you found, and 3 of them will get you to the finish line in the map much faster or much more easily than other ones, you can just focus on those 3. Or with the subsets, if you know the subsets are shorter. So doing HTR is not so much about just another thing to reduce the puzzle, but at this point it is mathematical, it is methodical, it is where you can look at different cases and say, okay, that's the easier case, I'm going to do that one. And that way you're not spending time just randomly moving the cube and hoping that you find a good solution. Also, with using the hyperparity maze, or the HTR map, as I like to call it, it's very visual that you can say, it looks like this, I am right here. Okay, so that's going to be 2 quarter turns or 5 quarter turns, whatever you're going to need. So you can do double domino reduction and just hope for the best. But just doing HTR is not really the goal. It's looking at different possibilities and seeing which HTR is actually going to be better than another one. Once you get used to HTR, it's not difficult. You can find a bunch of HTRs. Finding what's the optimal HTR, that's where the subsets and the maze come into play. And I think that's something that people forget. It's not just about doing it, it's about looking at the numbers. Now, also to note, when we are learning HTR, we're really learning how to solve the corners. The edges are kind of an afterthought, something that you do as you get near the end of HTR. Either with 1 quarter turn left or 2 quarter turns left, you'll try to involve the edges in there. If you have time and you are really efficient with it, you can try to solve edges at the same time, but for the most part, you're just solving corners, and that's what we're going to focus on. Okay, so let's get into the heart of things now. How do you actually get to HTR? And I personally, and this is gonna bother some people that do HTR, I like to do hyperparity. Hyperparity is a method that was put together by Rodney Kidney. I'm going to link his video and his document below. He came up with this. I'm gonna describe it in a way that makes sense to me. I'm very visual, and hyperparity is a very visual method of doing it, and you don't need to do any blind or NIST tracing. Well, blind tracing if you don't do what I did. NIST tracing is where you see what it looks like on the inverse. I don't think I've really defined it, so that's what that is. So let's get into this, and I want to show an example of why you can't just solve it like domino reduction again. So let's do a setup. This is not a full scramble, just a setup. And I'll put it on the screen. R2U, R2U, R2U2, F2U prime, F2U. So let's say we have this case. We are solving the final UD faces, and we see this. And we are just, again, going to focus on corners. Don't worry about edges. Edges might not be solved in this case, but that is fine. And so here's what we have here. Let me use another cube as the example. And if I want to just solve these corners, I could do R2, U2, F2, and then U. And now all the corners are solved. But what just happened here is that now we can't actually solve the corners because I have 3 on one side, 1 on the other, and no matter what I do, I can't get all 4 on the same side unless I start doing 90-degree turns again. So another example then, we could do R2 U prime, gives me something a little bit different. R2 U2 F2 U F2 U. And if you're not following how I got those moves, don't worry just yet. But again, it looks like we have a completed HTR, finished HTR. But the problem is we can't actually solve the corners. We are going to have 2 swapped no matter what. And it's going to leave us with a really bad case at the end, needing like an N permutation. Because this has even parity. And what I just did in the last time was only 3 90-degree turns. So back to this once more. Why do we have this map or subsets? And it helps us get through what we need to do in a more visual manner, or instead of saying, okay, so I need to adjust this, and it's not so randomized. So with here, what I ended up doing is I know I have 4 quarter turns, which you can find in a couple different ways. One way is doing a blind trace, meaning that you would look at it like you're doing blind solving, and starting here, that's in the right spot. So we'll do, this needs to go to here. That's 1. So 1, 2, there we go, sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even number of swaps. So I know it's 2 or 4. It can't be more than 5. It doesn't need to be more than 5 at least. And then I would look at the case, and looking at this case, this is what some people would call 4C, but on the map, I know that I cannot just solve this directly. I can either go, and actually I'm just going to put it up on the screen right now. When I fill it out, which we're going to do together, so we're actually right here, and we could do 1 where we stay here, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and this is our final spot. Or we could do 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. Some are better than others. We could do the inverse. There's all these different ways of knowing where to go. So before we go through the map and how you can find your way back to a solved state, let's go over the parity, even or odd. And you saw what I just did here, which was a blind trace, how you would find how many swaps you need to do in blind solving. And that works fine. I recently started doing something different, which was just count the number of quarter turns. As an example, if here's my scramble, I count how many quarter turns. It takes a few seconds when I start the solve, but I do that. If it's an odd number, I know I'm going to need an odd number of quarter turns to get back to a solved state. I'm going to do a solve that I just did this morning, and I have
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
17 quarter turns, odd number, and I'll either write odd or 17 on my sheet. So after DR, that tells me how many quarter turns I'm going to need. So let's find out. On an EO that I did, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the DR added 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Another odd number. So I want to keep an odd number of moves, and I already have an odd number, so I either need to do 2 or 4 quarter turns. And depending on the case, I would do 2 or 4. And in this case, I only have 2. But I find that a lot easier than constantly doing blind traces. A third way you could do it, which I used to do this even before blind tracing, is try to solve as many corners as you can, count how many quarter turns you did, and then just add, let's say, 1 or 2 more swaps that are needed. So you can just solve it as much as you can and check that. But I think counting the number of quarter turns is a lot faster and easier in the long run. If you have an even number of quarter turns needed, it's going to be 2 or 4. If you have an odd, it's 1, 3, or 5. And for the most part, people will usually just throw out anything that's 5. And much of the time throw out anything that's 4. I've had a couple good results with 4 quarter turns, but it's only when nothing else works out and I'm just relying on it at this point. Usually 3 quarter turns is nice. 2 and 1 are really nice as well. However, if you have 1 quarter turn, sometimes you can't actually solve it in 1 to get all the edges, and you need to backtrack anyways, and you end up with 3 in the end. Let's go into the map. The HTR map, or the hyper parity maze. I'm going to draw it on here and also show you how to practice it as we do it. And we are first going to look at what the front and back looks like. And what I mean by that, I'm actually going to set up the scramble I just had, what I was telling you about. And in this example, I've done DR where I have red and orange all oriented. So I would look at any other side and you can get the details you need from any side here. There's no strict rule there. I often will do white and yellow when I have solved orange and red or blue and green, and I can see which corners are misoriented. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will help me figure out which case I have as far as that top row. That's what that looks like. I'm going to set it up how I have with EO and DR. We're going to pretend we did EO on blue and green and DR on red and orange, so the white and yellow are all oriented, and that's the final sides we'll be doing 90-degree turns on. I'm going to just mix this up a little bit so it doesn't look completely solved. I think it's easier to visualize when not everything looks perfect. If you have no misoriented corners, you're going to be in this first row. So this is going to be a spreadsheet. This is going to be a map. We're going to see where we can go and where we can't go. Now, this also could be where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's kind of rare that you would have that, but if you do, you're in that same row. And here's where the fun comes in. So we can move from that row to this row by doing a U move or a D move. And we see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 misoriented corners. I'm going to draw this. Actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold it with blue and green in front. So we're going to look for red and orange as misoriented. I tend to do that more often. I just like the way it looks. And what I'm going to do is draw kind of what it looks like over here. Where the front, we see 2 corners, and this is the back sort of at like a mirror image. If you had a mirror back here, that's what you would see. And if they're all on the same face, we'll go from column 1 to column 2, like that. I used to hold it always with that facing me, and it would be the same situation, putting the corners on the same side and doing a 90-degree turn, just like we did with domino reduction. In this state, these corners could be a lot of different places, right? And if we ever set them up, so we have a column on the front and a column on the back, R2, U2, F2, 2 corners here, and on the back we have 2 corners here. This is a fun state because if I do any U move or D move, I end up at the exact same spot. So you can mess with your corners this way, and you'll just be there. Any other setup, let's say if I had 2 here, and then 2 here, like this, and did a U move, we are going to then get shifted over to the next column, which I'm going to call, let me put some names to this. This one I like to call the 2, 2 column, because everything's always 2 and 2, whether it's 2 on the top, 2 in the bottom, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, things like this. This column I call the 3, 1, because everything's always 3, 1. You'll have 3 on one side and 1 on the other. Whether that is the front and back, or you could have 3 on one side on the top and 1 on the bottom, but it's always that 3, 1. I'm going to go back for just a second on that 2, 2 spot on these. I don't need to draw everything else out, but there's just any way you could set these up where they're diagonal, or you could have, there was something else too. What was it? 2 and 2, but they're on the same side. You'll just end up in the 3, 1 case. And the 3, 1 case, you can either get back to the 2, 2, or if you put 3 of them on one side or only 1 on one side, so for example, we'll have 3 on a U face and then 1 on a D face, you'll get to the final column, which is 2 or 6 bad corners. I'm going to draw these just as 2 because it can be essentially the same thing. If you have the same number on the top and bottom, you'll be able to switch back to the 3, 1. If you have, let's say, 2 on the U face, the different number on the U face compared to the D face, you'll stay in this column. The people that do subsets will often call this either the solved state, or this is where you could be in fake HTR. This is usually 4A, this is usually 4B, and this is 2C or 6C. When I say usually 4A or 4B, there's a specific subset that they call 4C, and this is why I don't like this version, because it's, to me, that complicated my brain. It makes sense once you understand what they're doing with it, but we have the 2, 2 column, the 3, 1 column, and then either just 2 or 6 bad edges. And here's where I want you to stop, practice this. Don't worry about solving everything. Don't worry about parity. Don't worry about any of that. Just go from, okay, here I have 2 bad corners. So if I put them both on the U face, I will still have 2 bad corners. Or if I do a D move, I will now have 6 bad corners. If I put, let's say, 1 on top and 1 on the bottom and do a U move, and now I have the 3-1 case. There's 3 on the top, 1 on the bottom. If I make it where there's 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top, I do a U move, and now I'm in the 2-2 case. If I put 2 here and 2 here and do U moves, I can be stuck in the 2-2 case forever. Or I can put all 4 on the same U face and solved. And what I want you to do is practice that. Just move between the different cases. Start right here, move here, move here, move here, move back, stay in the same spot for a while. Just move around and get used to what those corners look like. Again, we're just solving corners. We're not solving edges right now. That's kind of an afterthought as far as HTR when we're starting out goes. Practice that for a while, get used to it. Let's move on to the rows. So the rows are going to be a similar thing, and this is where the hyperparity maze or the HTR map differs. If you're doing subsets, you're not too worried about those top colors. That's just where these subsets come in, and you will often do an NIST trace where you see what it looks like on the inverse to make sure it's one case or another. I like just doing this. There's not a lot of options for these colors. So for example, let's zoom in here. I'm going to put a big old star here. This is where we are going to end up having a final solved cube. This would look like, I'm going to use yellow, if we had all 4 of the same color on top and bottom. So this is a big old reset. Pretend we didn't just do columns. We're going to do the same concept with the rows, and I want you to practice it the same way. That this version right here, if we have 4 of the same color on the top or the bottom and we do a U move, we clearly stay there. These could be set up in different ways. I could set them up as diagonals that are on top of each other. And again, I'm going to treat this like it's a mirror on the direct back. And what I just drew is actually, there we go. Like that, same thing though. And if I do a U move, that brings me to this top row where we will always have diagonals. And we can call this the diagonal row, because from here, no matter what 180 degree moves I do, I always have a diagonal there until I do a 90 degree U move, and then we are back to row 2, or the solved state row. Any other setup you do that has 2 on one face, 2 on another, whether they are directly above each other, like what I have here, 2 and 2, or they are separated. If you have 2 bars that are parallel, that's how you know that you're in that same state. They're parallel like that or parallel like this. They're not adjacent, because that would then be here, where you have 2 corners one direction, 2 corners another. They are perpendicular to each other, is what I should be saying. And from here, if I do a 90 degree turn, I'm back to the solved state. Or if I set it up to where I have 3 and then 1, and I will clarify this 3, 1 in a moment, and do a 90 degree turn, you will get to our final row. You have a different, it's off the screen for a moment. You have a different 3-1 case. And you might say, okay, how do I differentiate between them? On this row, the 1 on the side that's the 1 where you have 3 and 1 is right underneath one of the corners, meaning it could be here, so it'd be underneath that corner. On this bottom row, it is either in the middle of the 3, so like here and here, or you could have it here, meaning it is where the open one is. So the 3-1 is different based on where that 1 ends up being. Or if you're like, visually I'm having trouble seeing that, just see if you can set it up as 2-2. You cannot set up this 3-1 as 2-2 as far as bars go. If you tried to, you would get a bar and a diagonal. This might be the easiest one for me to see, because If I see a bar on a diagonal, it's got to be this one. And this is kind of a fun state because if you do a U move, you always have a bar and a diagonal, no matter what. So another one where you can just loop in on itself. And here we have our cases. Here are what the top and bottom look like. And again, just practice this. So for example, I've got diagonal and a bar. I'm going to set it up to be 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and 1. Do a U move. I'm going to be in what I'm going to call row 3. This is row 3. So we've got row 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if I set it up as 2, 2, and I do a U move, I will now be in the solved row, row 2. If I want diagonals, set up diagonals and U move. And now I'm in row 1. And keep doing that around the up and down over and over again. That is just the way to practice it. So we have all of the states we can have. I'm just going to move myself. I'm going to make myself smaller. There we go. And I'm going to be right down here. The reason I'm moving down here is because you cannot have anything right there. I'm going to show you this maze or this map because not everywhere, like you can't go every which way. And there are some spots that you just can't go. So for example, I'm going to make a green square. Because I like to talk about this like it's a map, this is a garden. There's a garden here. There's a garden here. These are protected wildlife areas. That yellow star is where we want to land. The white circles are where we could be. So we could be on this circle and this would be just one move away because we can go from there to here. Okay, so I set this up. Right now I'm in that state where that circle is. I've got diagonals that will always be diagonal. So I know I'm in that state. And 1, 2, 3, 4 bad edges. That's in the 2, 2 setup, meaning it could be here, it could be there. Put it all in the same face, do a U move, and we go from that white circle to the star. There's other places I could go with this though, right? Like I could set it up where I have 2 here, 2 here. So if I do a U move, I end up staying in that column, but I could put all yellow on one side. Now, this one could also get to a solved state. And before I start filling all this out, you can start seeing some patterns where if I was at that first one, if I was up here, and let's say I had even parity, well, I would need to do 2 or 4 moves. Well, instead of just going down like that, I could go to this state and then over. Or if I was here and I had even parity, I could go up and then over that way. Most of these open spots only have one case. There's some weird ones, which I'll show you, but other than that, there's a bunch of different versions. So I'm going to fill in some other circles. As you can see, this spot right here, this has 2 different variations. And what I do to help identify what it is I'll put the corners in the state that's going to keep them in that column, because one of these will go up to row 1 and the other one will go down to row 3. So I can visually see which way I can get back or which one it is just by that. I don't need to spend forever trying to identify this case here. So I'm going to fill out some of these. This one you can solve in 1. This you could solve in 2. If you wanted to solve it with odd parity, you'd have to go like that, which would be in 3, going 1, 2, 3. There's no way for this one to be solved in 2, so it has to be 4 quarter turns. And this is where you would look at a case and say, oh, I am right here. Is it odd parity? No, it's even. It's got to be 4. I might just ditch that one. As I fill this out, this is something that I used to have open and with me as I was practicing Fewest moves until I started getting used to what it looked like. And remember, you're not going to be using every single case. There's certain ones, if you land there, you're just like, I'm probably going to just toss this. This one could be solved in 3 or 4 moves. This could be solved in 2 or 5. If I landed on that case and I found I had odd parity, I would likely just ditch it. Let's stop here for a moment, and I'm going to show you the scramble that I had that used red and orange for the top and bottom, just to give us a different visual and figure out where we are at. So I have even parity, and let's see what the front and back look like. I've got 1 corner here, 2, and then 3. So 3 on one side, 1 on the other. I am going to be in this column. Then I look at the top and bottom. I've got 1, 3. Okay, is this one on top of the edges of the triangle? No, that's above here. So that is going to be this row. I've found where I am at. I am right here, and I have even parity, meaning it can be solved in 2. And if we're going to solve corners, first thing I'm going to do is have it where I have 2 corners on top, 2 on bottom. So let's see here, 1. So I need to move that one up here so I can put 2 on one face, 2 on the other. And then I also want to make sure I have it looking like this. 3 on one side, 1 on the other. So if I just do D2, that could work. I'm going to write it out on screen right now. I could do D2, R, and then I have 2 and 2, perfect. And I want to set it up where I have 4 on one face and that it's 2 and 2. Well, if you do 4 on one face, it should do that automatically in this version. So I just did U2, R. There we go. HTR corners are done. It is now solvable. So by knowing where we are on the map, I was able to do it in 4 moves. What about edges? Okay. So let's talk about that. Let me undo this. The way you would solve edges is by basically seeing where you are with 1 turn away. So for example, if I did, let me go back to there. If I did D2R, I've got, let's look at bad edges. We have, and I'm going to actually hold it where I have red and orange in front and back like I would for domino reduction. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bad edges. Similar to DR, you can look at that E-slice. That's not great. We don't want that. So let me backtrack. R prime, D2. Looking at this, I'm 2 moves away. And I have 1 bad edge, another bad edge. I've got 2 bad edges. If we're thinking in domino reduction sake, I'm gonna erase this. Right now I have 4C, 2E. That could be set up to one of those 4C, 2E cases. And that's what I did to solve this HTR. So for example, let's look at this now. What I did, F2, B2, which gave me a bar, and then D2, which lined up there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and ended with R, D2, R. Just set up to 4C, 2E. You have to be careful because you could set up to something like that and then not have the right setup here with doing, like, let's say this and this. I mean, if you have it where it's set up like that, you are going to go there and then there for sure. You're not going to go here and then up. But let's say you set up 4C2E and it looks like this, which is good, but then it looks like that case. You will end up going here first and then here and be at fake HTR and not be able to solve it. So you have to be careful with that. But when solving edges, you're either going to look at your final step, do you have 4 edges, or when you're 2 steps away, and do you have 4C2E or 4C6E, and go from there. At this point in the video, this is where I want you to feel most comfortable, because this is where you can find different spots and move around. And the way to practice again is to just move around. So I'm going to fill out the rest of these circles. Some of these cases you can loop and be at that same spot. Okay, here's the full map. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. So for example, if you have something like this, unless you have nothing else going for yourself, ditch it. And when you have these ones that like, okay, there's 3 that look very similar, what I'll do is just set it up to a case and see where it lands. So for example, if I'm here and I set it up to where I'm going to go to this row, if I can't, I know that I've got that one. If I can, I get to here, I know where I'm at. If I get to here, then I'll see what happens when I set up bars. So I'll just set up a couple things instead of trying to identify them in a weird way. So let's do this. I'm going to just randomly scramble this with different U move, 90-degree U moves, and see where I end up. So let's look on the front and back. And actually, I like to have blue and green in front for this, but it doesn't really matter. You could do either one and just see what colors are off. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 bad edges, and they're in the 3, 1 position. So I am in this column. Look at the top and bottom. I have a bar and a bar that's perpendicular to it. So I am here, or I could be in one of these cases, a lot of 3 different variations. So what I do is I first just move to 2, 2 and see what I can get from it. I'm going to do an L2, so I have 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and do a U move. And I have moved down to here, meaning that I had to have been on this one. So I am here now, and that's fine. Let's move to here. Actually, yeah, let's move to there. So I'm going to have to do the bar and the diagonal. And then right now I've got 2 and 2. I actually have this case. So I could just keep doing U moves, and I'm here. U move, and I'm here. U move, and I'm here. Let's fix that. Let's do an F2, 2 and 2. So if I do a U move, I am now here. And you can check it again. 3, 1, and then 3, 1. Wait. Oh, no, sorry. When I did that, I ended up going back to here. I wasn't paying attention. Let's do that again. I need to have the bar on the diagonal. There we go. Bar, diagonal, 2 and 2. So it looks like that little one I made. If I do a U move, I will be here now. And then if I want to get here, I need to do 3, 1 on the top and bottom, something like this. And then make sure I have, this is not good there. There we go. 3 on the top, 1 on the bottom, and then 1, 2, 1, 2. And then I can just put all 4 on the same side, and that's going to get me to here. I could have parity right now because I was not counting. Let's see if I have parity. We're going to do it with the blind trace because I have no idea how many quarter turns I've done at this point. So starting from here, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Odd parity. If I do a U move, I am solved. So I would consider this like an intuitive approach to finishing HTR until you get to maybe the final quarter turn or final 2 quarter turns, and then it's setup moves. Most of this, or a lot of this, you'll kind of ignore if you run into it. Not all these spots are created equal. So for example, let's say you were here, or even here. Let's say you were here and you had odd parity. You would have to go this way, this way, this way to solve it. Well, to set up from here to here isn't bad, but all of your corners would be on the same U face or D face. And then to get it to where you have to go up here to be diagonal, you need at least 3 moves to get it to there. You have quite a few moves that way. Where this case, it could be 1 setup move, 1 setup move, 1 setup move. And a lot of people will actually just look for this case more than other ones. This one's often called 2C3 because you have 2 corners or 6, and it's 3/4 turns away. And then depending on how many edges you have off, if you had, let's say, 2C3, but there are 8 bad edges, that one's not great. But if you have 2 bad edges, that's wonderful. So not everything's created equal as far as move count. And at the moment, I would just leave it at this, and then maybe I'll make a video on move count and efficiency that way. And one other thing with this too, this one and this one, there are things on the inverse that they end up swapping places. It's a bit easier or fewer moves to go from here to there than it is to go like that. So you can try different ones, or in the middle of HTR, let's say you went from here to here, do the inverse, so now you will have something else to work with. So definitely check those inverses. This will be the last thing. I'll wrap it up here, but I did the EO on the inverse. So I'll do that first and go forward. So now I have diameter reduction. And let's check this case. So corners 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's that one that you don't see a lot, but I am in what would essentially be the solved column. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, they're perpendicular. So I am at fake HTR because I have these perpendicular bars here. Okay, and let's check parity. I could do the blind trace. I'm going to count quarter turns. I know with the scramble that the scramble had an odd number of quarter turns. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's an odd number, so I need an even number of quarter turns to finish this off, meaning I have to have 4. I could go here, 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 or I could go here, 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 and here. I have not solved this HTR. We're going to do it together, but I threw it away because that's just bad. I didn't want to do that one. But let's find out. Let's see if I can first just do a U move and what happens. If I do a U move, I end up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then parallel bars. So I need to go that way. So let's put them all yellow on the same face. So I'll do L2, and then this is good. I've got diagonals. I'm going to do U. And that now brought me to here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm looking now, I'm 2 moves away. I could either set it up to where when I go to here, I have 4 edges left, or I only have 2 edges here and here, so I'm going to try to set it up to that 4C2E case. So let's see here. For the sake of just this video, let's do the inverse. So I'm going to first do U prime L2 U prime, invert the DR, invert the scramble, then do EO, and I should be at the same spot for this. Like I said, sometimes it can switch spots like this one and this one, but this will be the same in the inverse. Let's see what happens on the inverse if I just do diagonals. So I'm going to do, let's say, F2, D2, R2, then U. And I am now here, and actually this did leave me with 4 bad edges. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is not a bad finish. L2, F2, B2, and then D. And you can see here I've got 4 corners, and then the 4 bad edges are there. But this adding 8 moves there, 3 more for that first part, so the setup of 11 moves, that would be too much for what I would expect at this point. But from here, we could just solve the entire thing with just 180-degree moves on all sides. And there's some different setups we can do. There's different techniques for that. I'm not too worried about just yet as far as teaching. Sometimes it's just solving as much as you can. Things often fall into place. And then inserting an algorithm. Okay, this is an extremely long video. But I want everything out there, and I want you to know that this is just a methodical, step-by-step way to not fall into traps, to not fall into situations that are hard to solve from there. Again, linked below are a bunch of different files. There's the Hitchhiker's Guide to HTR and FMC, which for myself cleared up a lot of things, and for some people is like all that they need and goes through that whole subset idea. If hyperparity seems to work for you, do it. I think it's less work. Other people think it's more work. Everyone's different with it. But the biggest thing is practice. The more you practice, the faster you'll get at identifying things. The faster you get at identifying things, the faster you can throw things away that are bad. I was, after doing about 100 HTR solves, I was lingering around 26 moves, and then I found that I just needed to get rid of things more easily and not get stuck on one thing. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, leave any questions down below. This is something that honestly took me like 6 years to really be like, oh, I get it now. And either I needed just someone like me to explain it in that way, or I needed that time to do it. Some people figure it out within like a day and like, oh, I get it, I can do that now. But don't stress over it. It will just take practice of identifying things. That's the biggest part of it. So leave your thoughts or questions down below. Hit like and subscribe for content like this in the future. And as always, keep following SpeedCube Review for more news and reviews.